The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and disappointment, and I could feel everyone's eyes on me as he read out my inheritance. My sister Veronica sat there in her designer suit, already calculating what she'd do with Dad's vintage Mustang, while I clutched the small, wrapped package that contained my entire legacy, a single hubcap, just one, from a car I'd never even seen. The room erupted and barely contained snickers when the lawyer announced it, and Veronica didn't even try to hide her smirk. "Well, Emma," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, "at least you got something this time." But as I sat there, feeling the weight of that seemingly worthless piece of metal through the wrapping paper, I noticed something the others didn't. The lawyer's hands were trembling as he handed it to me, and there was something in his eyes that looked almost like fear? Or was it excitement? I wouldn't understand until later, when I finally unwrapped it alone in my apartment and discovered that this wasn't just any hubcap. It was a key to something my father had hidden for 23 years, something that would change not just my life, but expose the real reason why my family had treated me like a ghost in my own home. If you're someone who's ever felt overlooked or undervalued by your own family, this story might hit close to home. Stay with me, because what I discovered that night made every year of being invisible worth it. My name is Emma Hartley, and for 23 years, I was the family disappointment. Not because I'd done anything wrong, quite the opposite. I was the quiet one, the one who studied while Veronica partied, the one who worked 2 jobs while she spent Dad's money. But in the Hartley family, being responsible was somehow worse than being reckless. It meant you were boring, predictable, unworthy of attention. The reading of Dad's will was supposed to be my moment of vindication. After all, I was the one who'd spent every Sunday with him during his last year when the cancer made him too weak to maintain his precious car collection. I was the one who'd held his hand through chemo, who'd listened to his rambling stories about his youth, who'd made him laugh when the pain got too bad. Veronica had visited exactly 3 times, and only when she needed money. But there we were, in that stuffy office on Madison Avenue, and the will was being read like a grocery list of my inadequacy. The house went to Veronica. The investment portfolio went to Veronica. The boat, the vacation home in the Hamptons, even Mom's jewelry, all to Veronica. With each item, I felt myself shrinking smaller and smaller in my chair. "To my daughter Emma," the lawyer read, adjusting his glasses, "I leave the hubcap from the Phantom." The Phantom. I'd never heard Dad mention any car by that name, and trust me, I knew all his cars. He'd had 17 of them at his peak before the medical bills forced him to sell most of the collection. But the Phantom? Nothing. "Is that it?" Veronica asked, not even pretending to sound surprised. "Just a hubcap?" The lawyer nodded, sliding a wrapped package across the mahogany table to me. It was heavier than I expected, about the size of a dinner plate, wrapped in brown paper like something from a forgotten storage unit. My stepmother Patricia, who'd been silent until now, let out a little laugh. "How fitting," she said, examining her manicured nails. "Emma always was happy with scraps." That wasn't true, but I'd learned long ago that defending myself only made things worse. Patricia had married Dad when I was 7, 2 years after Mom died, and she'd made it clear from day one that I was an inconvenience she'd inherited, along with Dad's first wife's china. Veronica, her daughter from her first marriage, was only a year older than me, but Patricia had insisted Dad legally adopt her. "We're a family now," she'd said, but what she meant was, "My daughter deserves everything yours would have gotten." And Dad, grief-stricken and desperate for stability, had agreed. The meeting ended with handshakes and hollow condolences. Veronica hugged me, a performance for the lawyer's benefit, and whispered, "Don't worry, Em. I'll let you visit the car sometimes. You can even polish it if you want." I took the subway home to my studio apartment in Queens, the hubcap heavy in my bag. The whole ride, I kept thinking about Dad's last words to me. He'd been barely conscious, morphine making his words slur, but he'd gripped my hand and said, "Emma, baby, I'm sorry for everything, but I kept my promise to your mother. You'll understand soon." I'd thought it was the drugs talking. Mom had been dead for 16 years. What promise could he have kept? My apartment was exactly what you'd expect from someone working as an assistant at a publishing house while paying off student loans. 500 square feet of cozy living, as the landlord called it. But it was mine, earned with my own money, and that made it a palace compared to the guest room I'd occupied in the family home. I set the package on my kitchen counter and stared at it. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened. What was the point? Dad had made his choice, and I had to live with it. But curiosity won out, as it always did with me. The brown paper came away easily, revealing a hubcap that looked wrong. It was definitely old, probably from the 1960s based on the style, but the metal was all wrong. Too bright, too heavy, too expensive looking. I turned it over and nearly dropped it. Engraved on the back, in elegant script, were the words, "Eleanor's Phoenix, 1961, 1 of 1. Eleanor." That was my mother's name. My hands shaking, I examined the hubcap more carefully. There was a seam running around the edge, barely visible unless you were looking for it. Grabbed a butter knife and carefully pried at it. The hubcap split open like a locket, revealing a hollow interior. Inside was a key, an old-fashioned brass key, and a folded piece of paper. The paper was yellowed with age, but I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. I'd seen it in the few birthday cards and letters she'd left me before she died. "My darling Emma," it read. "If you're reading this, then your father kept his promise to me. The key opens a storage unit at Manhattan Secure Storage, Unit 1961. Everything I wanted you to have is there. Your father doesn't know what's inside. I made him promise never to look, never to tell anyone, and to give this to you only after his death. He thinks it's just sentimental items, but Emma, my sweet girl, your real inheritance has been waiting for you all along. The Phantom isn't just a car, it's your birthright. Love always, Mom." I read the letter 3 times before it sank in. A storage unit. Mom had left me something in a storage unit, and Dad had kept it secret for 16 years. But why? What could be so important that it had to be hidden even from him? I looked up Manhattan Secure Storage on my phone. It was a high-end facility in Midtown, the kind of place where rich people stored their art collections and vintage wines, the kind of place I could never afford, but I had to know. The next morning, I called in sick to work, the first time I'd ever done so, and took the subway to Midtown. Manhattan Secure Storage was exactly as intimidating as I'd expected, all marble and brass and security guards who looked like they could bench press a car. "I need to access Unit 1961, I told the receptionist, trying to sound like I belonged there. She typed something into her computer, then looked up at me with surprise. "That's one of our legacy units. It's been paid up for 25 years in advance. May I see your identification and key?" I handed both over, my heart pounding. She examined them, made a phone call, then handed them back with a smile that was suddenly much warmer. "Right this way, Miss Hartley. I'll have someone escort you to the vintage vehicle section." Vintage vehicle section? The security guard who escorted me was chatty, which was good because I was too stunned to speak. "Unit 1961 is a legend around here," he said as we took an elevator down to what seemed like an underground parking garage. "Been sealed since 1999. Old-timers say the woman who rented it was some kind of racing royalty, but nobody knows for sure. You family?" "She was my mother," I managed. His eyes widened. "No kidding? Man, the guys are going to flip. We've had a betting pool going for years about what's in there." The storage area was climate-controlled and pristine, with individual units that looked more like private garages than storage spaces. Unit 1961 was at the end of a long row, with a rolling door that hadn't been opened in over 2 decades. The key fit perfectly. The door rolled up with a mechanical hum, automatic lights flickering on inside. I gasped. The car sitting in that storage unit was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It was a 1961 Ferrari 250 GT, painted in a deep midnight blue that seemed to glow even under the fluorescent lights. But it was more than just a classic car. It had been modified, customized, turned into something unique. The body was sleeker, the engine compartment larger, and there were racing modifications that even I, with my limited car knowledge, could recognize. But it was the walls of the unit that made my knees weak. They were covered in photographs, newspaper clippings, and trophies, all featuring my mother. My mother, who I'd been told was a secretary before she married my father. My mother, who Patricia had always described as sweet but simple. My mother, who had apparently been Eleanor Phoenix Mitchell, one of the first female professional race car drivers in America. The headlines told a story I'd never heard. Phoenix Mitchell takes Daytona by storm. First woman to qualify for International Grand Prix. Mitchell breaks speed record in custom Ferrari. There was a desk in the corner of the unit covered in documents. I sat down, my legs too shaky to hold me, and started reading. The first folder contained racing contracts, endorsement deals, and bank statements. My mother hadn't just been a racer, she'd been successful. Incredibly successful. There were deposits here for hundreds of thousands of dollars, all dated from the early 1990s. The second folder was thicker, filled with legal documents. As I read through them, the story became clearer and more horrible with each page. My mother had been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer in 1998, when I was 6. Knowing she was dying, she'd tried to set up a trust fund for me with her racing earnings. But there was a problem. She'd signed a prenuptial agreement when she married my father. Not because he'd asked for one, but because her manager had insisted on it to protect her racing assets. The prenup stated that in the event of her death, all assets acquired before the marriage would go to her biological children, not her spouse. But Patricia's lawyers had found a loophole. The documents showed a legal battle that had been hidden from me my entire life. Patricia had claimed that my mother's racing career was a hobby funded by my father's money, and therefore the earnings were marital assets. It was a lie. Mom had been racing before she even met Dad, but Mom was too sick to fight it properly. In the end, they'd reached a settlement. Mom could keep one asset, just one, to pass directly to me. She'd chosen the Phantom, her custom Ferrari, the car she'd built with her own hands and raced to victory 17 times. But there was a condition. It had to remain in storage, untouched and unmentioned until after my father's death. Patricia had agreed, probably thinking one old car wouldn't be worth much. She'd been wrong. The final folder made me gasp out loud. It contained an appraisal from last year. Somehow my mother had arranged for regular appraisals even after her death. The car, being one of a kind and with its racing history, was valued at $12 million. $12 million. But that wasn't all. There was a letter from a law firm dated just 6 months ago. They'd been hired by my mother before her death to investigate Patricia's finances once I claimed my inheritance. Their findings were devastating. Patricia had been embezzling from my father's companies for years. She'd hidden it well, using her position as his wife to authorize transfers and hide debts. But she'd made one mistake. She'd used some of the stolen money to pay for Veronica's trust fund, the one she'd claimed came from her deceased first husband. The lawyers had everything documented, ready to file the moment I gave the word. I sat in that storage unit for 3 hours, reading everything, understanding finally why my father had been so distant in his final years. He'd known something was wrong, but hadn't been able to prove it. The prenup my mother had signed had inadvertently protected Patricia from scrutiny during their marriage. But now Dad was gone, and all of Patricia's protections had died with him. There was one more thing in the storage unit, a leather racing jacket with Phoenix embroidered on the back. I put it on, and it fit perfectly. Inside the pocket was a business card for someone named Marcus Chen, with "Call me when you're ready," EM, written on the back in my mother's handwriting. I called the number, not really expecting anyone to answer after all these years. Phoenix Racing, a man answered. This is Marcus. Hi, I said, my voice shaking. This is Emma Hartley, Eleanor Mitchell's daughter. There was a long silence, then, Emma. Oh my God, Emma, I've been waiting for your call for 23 years. Marcus, it turned out, had been my mother's racing partner and best friend. He'd kept Phoenix Racing alive all these years, turning it into one of the most successful custom racing shops in the country. He'd been waiting, he said, for Eleanor's daughter to come claim her rightful place. Your mother owned 60% of this company, he told me. I've been holding it in trust, per her instructions. The lawyers said I couldn't contact you until you contacted me. Emma, you're not just inheriting a car, you're inheriting a legacy. I met Marcus the next day at his shop in New Jersey. He was in his 60s now, with silver hair and kind eyes that filled with tears when he saw me in my mother's jacket. You look just like her, he said. Same fire in your eyes, even if you've been hiding it. He showed me around the shop, introduced me to the team, and then dropped another bombshell. My mother hadn't just been a racer. She'd been an inventor. Half the patents the shop used were hers. The royalties alone were worth millions. She knew Patricia would try to take everything, Marcus explained, so she hid it all. The car, the company shares, the patents, everything was put in trust for you. Your father knew about the car, but nothing else. Eleanor made me promise to wait until you were old enough and strong enough to handle the truth. But I'm nobody, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I'm just Emma, the disappointing daughter. Marcus's face darkened. Is that what they told you? Emma, your mother was the bravest, most talented person I ever knew. And from what I've heard, you're just like her, working 2 jobs to pay your own way, standing by your father when everyone else abandoned him. That's not disappointing. That's strength. He was right, I realized. I'd spent so long accepting Patricia and Veronica's version of me that I'd never stopped to question it. But the evidence was right there. I'd graduated summa cum laude while working full-time. I'd gotten my job at the publishing house on my own merit. I'd survived 23 years of emotional abuse and still managed to be kind, to be there for my father when he needed me. That wasn't weakness. That was strength they couldn't break. Marcus helped me plan what came next. First, we had the Ferrari properly insured and moved to a secure facility. Then, I met with the lawyers my mother had hired all those years ago. They updated their investigation, and what they found was even worse than the initial report. Patricia hadn't just stolen from my father. She'd stolen from the company's pension fund. She'd hidden it well, but once they knew what to look for, the evidence was overwhelming. We're talking about $30 million over 15 years. Veronica, it turned out, was in on it. She'd been signing documents as my father's assistant for the last 5 years, authorizing transfers to offshore accounts. She'd probably thought she was being clever, but she'd left a paper trail a mile wide. The lawyers gave me 2 options. Go to the FBI immediately, or confront Patricia and Veronica first, give them a chance to make restitution. I chose confrontation, not out of mercy, but because I wanted to see their faces when they realized that the daughter they'd dismissed, the girl they'd treated like furniture, was the one who'd bring them down. I scheduled it for the next family gathering, Thanksgiving. Patricia always insisted on hosting, turning it into a production to show off for her society friends. This year, she'd invited 30 people, including 3 members of the company's board of directors. Perfect. I arrived early, which shocked Patricia. I never arrived early. I was wearing a new suit, designer, paid for with my first dividend check from Phoenix Racing, and my mother's racing jacket over it. "What are you wearing?" Patricia asked, her nose wrinkling. "That jacket is hideous and old." "It was my mother's," I said simply. Her face went pale. She recognized it. "Of course she did." "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "From her storage unit. The one she left me. You know, the one with the Ferrari?" Patricia's hands started shaking. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't," I said, walking past her into the living room where Veronica was holding court with some of her friends. "Hey, Veronica, nice car, by the way. The Mustang. Dad would have loved knowing you were enjoying it." Veronica smirked. "Well, he obviously wanted me to have it, just like everything else." "Right," I said. "Everything else. Tell me, how's your trust fund doing? The one from your father?" She frowned. "Fine. Why?" "Just curious. I mean, it must be nice having a father who left you millions, even if he's been dead since you were 2, even if he was a grocery store clerk who made $30,000 a year." The room had gone quiet. Patricia appeared in the doorway, her face white. "Emma," she said, her voice warning, "perhaps we should talk privately." "No," I said. "I think everyone should hear this. After all, some of the people in this room are investors in Dad's company. They have a right to know where their money went." Mr. Harrison, one of the board members, stood up. "What are you talking about, Emma?" I pulled out my phone and brought up the documents the lawyers had sent me. "I'm talking about embezzlement, $30 million over 15 years. Would you like to see the evidence, Mr. Harrison? The forensic accountants were very thorough." The room erupted. Veronica was screaming that I was lying. Patricia was trying to get everyone to leave, and the board members were demanding to see the documents. I stood in the center of it all, calm for the first time in my life. "You have 48 hours, I told Patricia over the chaos. "Return every penny, plus interest, or I go to the FBI. And Veronica, that Mustang you're so proud of, I'm taking it back. It was bought with stolen money." "You can't prove anything!" Veronica shrieked. I pulled out a folder and handed it to Mr. Harrison. "Actually, I can. Every transfer, every forged signature, every offshore account, it's all there." Patricia sank into a chair, her perfect facade finally cracking. "How?" she whispered. "My mother," I said. "She knew what you were from the beginning. She couldn't stop you while she was dying, but she made sure I'd have everything I needed to expose you when the time came." The next part happened fast. Mr. Harrison called an emergency board meeting. The FBI was notified. Patricia and Veronica were arrested 3 days later, both charged with embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. But the best part, the part that still makes me smile, was what happened with the will. It turned out that there was a clause in my father's will that Patricia had overlooked. If any beneficiary was convicted of a crime related to the estate or the family business, their inheritance would be voided and redistributed to the remaining beneficiaries. I was the only remaining beneficiary. The house, the portfolio, the boat, the vacation home, it all came to me, including the Mustang, which I donated to a charity auction. I didn't need it. I had the Phantom. The first time I drove my mother's Ferrari, Marcus was in the passenger seat. We took it to a track in upstate New York, and he taught me how to really drive it. Not just street driving, but racing. The car purred beneath my hands like it had been waiting for me all along. "Your mother would be so proud," Marcus said, as I took a curve at 90 miles an hour, feeling more alive than I'd ever felt before. I thought about all those years of being told I wasn't enough. All those family dinners where I'd been ignored, all those achievements that had been dismissed, all those times I'd been called disappointing. They'd been wrong. I wasn't disappointing, I was dangerous. Dangerous to their lies, their schemes, their carefully constructed facades. They'd tried to make me small because somewhere, deep down, they'd known that if I ever realized my own worth, their house of cards would collapse. And it had. Patricia got 15 years in federal prison. Veronica got 7, with a chance for parole in 4 if she cooperated. She sang like a canary, giving up every detail of Patricia's schemes, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. I sold the house in Westchester, too many bad memories, and bought a penthouse in Manhattan, close to the publishing house where I still worked. Yes, I kept my job. I loved it, and I was good at it. The money didn't change that, but I also became a partner in Phoenix Racing. Marcus and I are developing a new line of custom electric race cars, combining my mother's old designs with new technology. We're calling it the Eleanor series, and the first model sold for $3 million to a collector in Japan. I learned to race too. Not professionally. I'm not my mother, and I don't need to be, but for the joy of it. There's something about being behind the wheel of a car you truly understand, pushing it to its limits, that makes everything else fade away. Last month, I was at a racing event in Monaco when I ran into someone who'd known my mother. She was in her 70s now, one of the few female racers from my mother's generation who was still alive. "I heard Eleanor's daughter was racing the Phantom," she said, studying me with sharp eyes. I had to see for myself. We talked for hours. She told me stories about my mother I'd never heard, about her brilliance, her courage, her refusal to let anyone tell her she didn't belong on the track. "She talked about you all the time," the woman said, "even before you were born. She said she was going to have a daughter who would change the world." "I don't know about changing the world," I said. "Don't you?" she asked. "You exposed one of the biggest embezzlement schemes in corporate history. You recovered your mother's legacy. You're helping to revolutionize electric racing. And you did it all after being raised by people who tried to convince you that you were nothing. I'd say that's world-changing." She was right, in a way. But the biggest change wasn't in the world. It was in me. I'd spent 23 years believing I was the disappointment, the afterthought, the one who didn't matter. I'd accepted their version of me because I didn't know there was another version possible. But there was. There always had been. My mother had seen it. She'd known that Patricia would try to destroy me, try to make me small and weak and dependent. So she'd hidden my inheritance not just to protect the money, but to protect me. She'd made sure that when I was ready, when I was strong enough, I'd have everything I needed to claim my birthright. And the hubcap? I had it mounted and framed, and it hangs in my office at Phoenix Racing. Visitors always ask about it, and I tell them the truth. It's the most valuable thing I own. Not because it's made of platinum, it is, but because it was the key to understanding who I really am. I am Eleanor Mitchell's daughter. I am a survivor. I am a fighter. I am enough. The last time I saw Veronica was at her sentencing hearing. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a plain suit her public defender had probably picked out. She caught my eye as they led her away and mouthed something. It might have been, "I'm sorry." It might have been something else. I'll never know for sure, and I don't care. Patricia never apologized. Even in court, even faced with overwhelming evidence, she insisted she'd done nothing wrong. She said my father had wanted her to have that money, that she'd earned it by putting up with him. The judge didn't buy it. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if my mother had lived. If I'd grown up knowing I was the daughter of a racing legend, if I'd been raised with confidence instead of criticism. But then I realized that this journey, as painful as it was, made me who I am. I earned my strength. I earned my success. And when I finally discovered my inheritance, I was ready for it in a way I might not have been if it had just been handed to me. The publishing house offered me a promotion last week, senior editor with my own imprint. I took it. The salary is nothing compared to what I make from Phoenix Racing, but that's not the point. I love books, love helping authors tell their stories. It's another way of racing, really, taking something raw and powerful and helping it reach its full potential. Marcus is teaching me the business side of Phoenix Racing, preparing me to take over when he retires. "Your mother always said you'd run this place one day," he tells me. She'd be so proud to see it happening. I think about her every day. Not the sick, frail woman I barely remember, but the Phoenix I've discovered in photographs and videos and stories. The woman who refused to let anyone tell her she couldn't race. The woman who built an empire and then hid it to protect her daughter. The woman who loved me enough to play the long game, even when she knew she wouldn't be there to see how it ended. I've started racing competitively now. Nothing major, just local events and charity races. But every time I put on my helmet, my mother's helmet, which Marcus had been saving for me, I feel her with me. And every time I cross a finish line, I think about all the finish lines she crossed, all the barriers she broke, all the people who told her she didn't belong and were proven wrong. Last week, I got a letter from Patricia in prison. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. It was short, Just a few lines. She wanted to know if I'd consider putting money in her commissary account. She said she was my stepmother, that family should stick together. I wrote back with a single word, no. Then I took a picture of the letter and posted it on the Phoenix Racing social media accounts, along with the story of what she'd done. The post went viral. Turns out, people love a good revenge story, especially when the villain is this transparently awful even from prison. The comments were brutal. Someone found Patricia's old social media posts, the ones where she'd bragged about her wealth and looked down on poor people. The internet, it turns out, has no mercy for hypocrites. But the best comment came from someone who'd known my mother. "Eleanor would have loved this," they wrote. "She always said the best revenge was a life well lived. Looks like her daughter learned that lesson perfectly." They were right. This life I'm living now, successful, confident, free, is the best revenge I could have asked for. Every morning, I wake up in my penthouse and choose which car to drive. I have 3 now, including the Phantom. Every day, I go to a job I love and excel at. Every evening, I come home to a life I built myself, with my own hands and my own strength. Patricia and Veronica thought they'd broken me. They thought they'd reduced me to nothing. They thought the hubcap was a joke, a final insult to the daughter who didn't matter. They were wrong. The hubcap was a key to my mother's legacy, yes, but more than that, a key to understanding my own worth. All those years of being told I was disappointing, I'd never stopped to ask, disappointing to whom? To people who were stealing from my father? To people who were threatened by my potential? To people who needed me to be small so they could feel big? Their disappointment was never about me. It was about them. I see that now, and I see something else too. Every insult they threw at me, every time they dismissed me, every moment they made me feel like nothing, they were accidentally forging me into something unbreakable. They created their own downfall, one cruel word at a time. The Phantom sits in my private garage now, gleaming and perfect. I drive it on Sundays, usually out to the cemetery where both my parents are buried. I tell them about my week, about the books I'm editing, about the new car designs we're working on. I tell my mother that I found her legacy and my father that I forgive him for not being strong enough to stand up to Patricia. And sometimes, on perfect days when the sun is shining and the road is clear, I take the Phantom out to the track and let her run. I push her to her limits, feeling the engine roar, the tires grip, the perfect balance my mother built into every curve and line. In those moments, I'm not the disappointing daughter or the forgotten child or the girl who got a hubcap. I'm Phoenix's daughter, and I'm flying. People sometimes ask me if I regret not getting my inheritance sooner, if I'm angry about all those lost years. The truth is, I needed those years. I needed to build my own strength, my own identity, separate from my mother's legacy. When it finally came to me, I was ready for it. I knew who I was without it, so I could appreciate what it meant with it. The publishing house is releasing a memoir next month, written by one of my authors. It's about a woman who discovers her own strength after years of being underestimated. Sound familiar? She dedicated it to me, saying I was her inspiration. I cried when I read that. Marcus and I are planning something special for next year. A race to honor my mother, with all proceeds going to a scholarship fund for young women who want to learn automotive engineering. We're calling it the Phoenix Rises Rally, and we've already got sponsors lined up. Red Bull wants to film a documentary about it, about my mother's legacy and how it was hidden and found again. I said yes, but only if they tell the whole truth. Not just the racing and the money, but the pain, the years of being dismissed and diminished, the strength it took to survive that, to maintain my kindness and integrity when surrounded by cruelty. Because that's the real inheritance my mother left me. Not just money and cars, but the knowledge that I could survive anything and come out stronger. The documentary crew interviewed Patricia in prison. I haven't watched it yet, but the director told me she still insists she did nothing wrong, that I manipulated everyone, that I was always jealous of Veronica. Even now, even with all the evidence, she can't admit the truth. But that's okay. Her denial doesn't change reality. The FBI has the facts, the court has the conviction, and I have my life. Veronica gets out on parole next year. Her lawyer reached out to me, asking if I'd write a letter of support for her early release. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to say no, to let her serve every day of her sentence, but then I realized I don't care anymore. She's nothing to me now. So I wrote the letter, but I told the truth, that she was young, that she was influenced by her mother, that she'd already lost everything that mattered to her. I didn't forgive her, but I didn't oppose her release either. The lawyer thanked me, said it was more than they'd hoped for. I told him to tell Veronica one thing: stay away from me. Build whatever life she can with whatever skills she has, but do it far from me and anything I've built. He agreed to pass along the message. Marcus is retiring next year, and I'll officially become CEO of Phoenix Racing. We're expanding, opening a second facility in California and partnering with Tesla on some new battery technology. My mother's designs were so far ahead of their time that we're still finding applications for them. Every patent is another reminder of her brilliance, another piece of the puzzle she left for me. But the most important thing I've learned through all of this isn't about money or cars or revenge. It's about identity. For 23 years, I let other people tell me who I was. I accepted their narrative because I didn't know I had the power to write my own. Now I do. I am Emma Hartley, daughter of Eleanor Phoenix Mitchell and James Hartley. I'm a senior editor at one of the most prestigious publishing houses in New York. I am the CEO-elect of Phoenix Racing. I am a survivor of emotional abuse who refused to let it define me. I am someone who chose kindness even when surrounded by cruelty, who chose integrity even when it would have been easier to become like them. I am not a disappointment. I never was. The hubcap, that single platinum hubcap that seemed like such an insult, sits in a place of honor in my office now. Sometimes people ask about it, and I tell them the story, the whole story. How a piece of metal that seemed worthless was actually priceless. How the smallest gift became the greatest inheritance. How sometimes what looks like an ending is actually a beginning. And when young women come to Phoenix Racing, drawn by my mother's story or mine, I tell them something else. I tell them that their worth isn't determined by what others give them or don't give them. It's not measured in money or cars or even achievements. It's measured in how they treat others when they have nothing, how they persevere when everything seems stacked against them, how they maintain their integrity when everyone around them is losing theirs. I tell them what I wish someone had told me all those years ago. You are enough, exactly as you are. And anyone who tells you otherwise is probably afraid of what you'll become when you realize it. The sun is setting now as I write this, painting the Manhattan skyline in shades of gold and pink. In an hour, I'm meeting Marcus at the track to test the newest Eleanor series prototype. It's based on one of my mother's most radical designs, something she sketched just weeks before she died. We've been working on it for months, and tonight we'll see if her vision translates to reality. I already know it will. Everything she touched turned to gold. Not immediately, not obviously, but eventually. She saw potential where others saw impossibility. She built success where others expected failure. And she left me not just an inheritance, but a blueprint for how to live a life worth living. Tomorrow I have a meeting with the publisher about my own book. Yes, I'm finally writing it. The story of the girl who got a hubcap and discovered an empire. The girl who was raised as nothing and became everything. The girl who learned that sometimes the smallest gifts carry the greatest treasures. But tonight, I'm going to drive. I'm going to take my mother's car, our car, and push it to its limits on the track. I'm going to feel the engine roar and the tires grip and the perfect balance of power and control. I'm going to remember the woman who built it and the legacy she left me, and I'm going to fly. Because I am Phoenix's daughter, and flying is what we do. The track is calling now, and Marcus just texted that he's already there, warming up the new prototype. I can see it from my window, actually. the lights of the track glowing in the distance, a beacon calling me home. Not to a place, but to a purpose, to a legacy, to a life I never imagined but always deserved. Patricia was right about one thing. I was always happy with scraps. But not because I had low standards, because I could see the value in things others dismissed. I could find worth in what seemed worthless. I could take a single hubcap and turn it into an empire. That's not settling for less. That's alchemy. That's magic. That's the phoenix rising from the ashes again and again until the whole world can see her fly. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have a date with destiny. Or at least with a really fast car and the memory of a mother who loved me enough to hide my inheritance until I was strong enough to claim it. The phantom is waiting, the track is calling, and Eleanor Mitchell's daughter is ready to fly. End. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story moved you, and if you believe that everyone deserves to have their true worth seen, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Comment below. And tell me, what was the moment in the story that resonated with you the most? And if you want more powerful stories about finding your strength and overcoming the odds, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's next.